Quiz Prep, Chapter 3.1 and 3.2. Okie dokie, welcome to Chapter 3.1 slash 3.2, maybe I should say dash, Quiz Prep. Okay, so let's just start with getting into our scenario. So see the table below about the East, North, Central states. So see these 5 states out there? For each state, the number of hospitals registering with Medicare is listed. So here are the states, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Ohio, Wisconsin, and then see that column that says number of hospitals X. That's the number of hospitals each of the states have that's registering with Medicare, and that's the data set we're going to use for our first question. So what's our first question here? Surprise, it's fill in the table. Okay, so let's look at what it's in the table. Column 2 says distance from mean number of hospitals, so that's like x minus x bar. Well, that means you're probably going to have to calculate x bar first, so we're going to have to do that. Then that third column says distance from mean number of hospitals squared, basically x minus x bar squared. So you're like for cell F there, we're going to take the square of cell A. So we got a plan, and let's go do it. Hi there. Okay, so this is our table with our data in it. And remember how I was saying, we're going to need to calculate x bar first. Remember, that's the mean, right? So let's start with that. So how are we going to do the mean? Well, first we need to do this. What does that mean? That big zigzaggy thing, that's a capital sigma. So sigma x means the sum of x. So what does that mean? That's like 141, see that? Plus 99 plus 107 plus, we'll go down here, 154 plus 75. Okay, we got them all. And already, this is like a cooking show. I already added them up. And so the sum of x equals 576. Okay, so we can do even this. We can do 576. Okay, and let's make this a little clearer. So you're going to need that to make the mean, but we're not done with the mean. That was the sum of x. So I'm going to go and get rid of some of those here. Probably shouldn't have been so close. Oh, how messy. Well, anyway, so back here. Okay, so what next? Well, we're going to take the mean, right? So that's, what does the mean? A sample mean? Remember, this is a sample, maybe. Well, maybe it's a population mean. Well, in any case, it's the mean of x. So here we go. That's x bar, and so that's signified by x bar. But what do you really do? Well, you take the sum of x and you divide it by n, like however many x's you have. So I went over that we had 5, so we're going to actually add this here. And by the way, this little strategy, you'll see I'll always do this, where you sort of make a list of what equals what, and you put it in some really clear spot, because then you won't erase it by accident and you might need it later. So we have this n here. So what we're going to do is take 576, which is the sum of x, divided by n, which is 5, right? I just said that, didn't I? And so then what do you get with that? Oh, you get 115.2. All right, so now, oh, I can even fill it in, 115.2. So now we're ready to actually start filling in these columns. All right, so I just thought I'd show you these answers, filled in over here. Well, see that this is what you should fill it, because we figured that out. But now we can turn our attention to the table and filling the table. So let's look at A. So that's supposed to be x minus x bar. So what is x minus x bar? Well, for A, the x is 141, right? So you do 141. Well, what is x bar? It's 1 minus 115.2, right? And I did this before, so I already did that. I'm not really this quick. And I got 25.8. There we go. Okay, so that's would equal, I guess, A. So let's do B. What do we do for B? So we'll do 99 minus 115.2. You see where I'm getting that? I'm getting that up from up here, right? Uh, I don't even need the sum of x anymore. I need that to get an x bar. So then we'll go here. And so notice how 99 is like less than 115.2. There's really a point there. So we're going to get a negative number. Don't be worried about that. That's supposed to happen. So that's going to be negative 16.2. And that's going to be in B. So if you keep going, you can fill in C, D, and E. 115.2, for C, it's going to be like, what is it, 107 minus 115.2. So it's going to be negative here. Oh, I did it, negative 8.2, which is C. But you get how to do this, right? So that's the first part, is filling in A, B, C, D, E, okay? All right, so what I did here was just put the answers down so that they're clear. So those are the answers for x minus x bar, but now we have the third column, which is x minus x bar squared, which is a fancy way of saying all of these things squared. So let's just look at f, right? So let's use the brush here. So f. So what are we going to do for f? Well, f is basically here's f. See, f is going to be a squared. So what's a? That's 25.8. So squared looks like that with a little 2. But what it really means is times 25.8. So what is 25.8 times 25.8? I already did it. And that is a kind of big number. It's 665.6. Okay, here, I'll make that clear. So that's what will go in the F part. So let's do G. Okay, well, we'll do it down here. So G is going to be, here's G. Maybe I can make this a different color. I like purple. So here's G and here's B. So we're going to take B to the second. Okay, so G equals negative 16.2. And actually, I'm going to put a parentheses to the second, which is the same as negative 16.2 times negative 16.2. Now I want to point out something. What happens when you multiply by a negative? It cancels out the negative, right? So you end up with positive numbers. So that's one of the rules about this column here, is even though you're going to have negative and positive numbers in the second column, you only should have positive numbers in the third column because of this rule, right? So let's look at G. The answer again is like big, 262. You always get these big answers because of the multiplication. Time 0.4. Okay, so then how would we do Michigan? Well, we would take C, which is over here, negative 8.2 times negative 8.2, and what would that be? That would be H, and that's I won't draw it out for you, but I did it. It's 67.2. So, okay, so your next challenge is to fill in H, I, and J, and then let's see if you do it right. Okay, here we go. This should be what the final answers are. Okay, so make sure you get these answers, because if you don't get these answers, then the rest of quiz prep you're going to screw up, right? All right, let's move on. Okay, here we go. We're moving on, and notice I put questions 3 through 6 up there along with our answers to the table because it matters, right? So we're going to have to answer these. So what is number 3? What does sum of squares mean? Well, that's secret statistics speak for the sum of actually this column right here. Because notice how those are the squares, like it's squared. So that's literally what you would be doing. So you'd be taking F, which is 665.6, plus 262.4, G, this whole column here, plus what's H here is 67.2 plus 15. Oh, 5. These squares are big because of this is square. Plus 1616 equals, and so what does that equal? Well, I did it off stage, and so we get 4 comma 116.6. Whoops, trying to write neatly here. So that's what happens if you add up all of that column. Okay, so this is messy, so we're going to get rid of this. But you see how I did that, right? So now we're going to go back and try to answer these other ones. So what is n? So in a previous part of this video, I wrote out what n was. And remember that's you just count them up. So we're going to go back and say n equals 5, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we'll just put a 5 there. N minus 1. Trick question. What is 5 minus 1 equals 4? I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be rude here. Okay, so then finally we have the question of what is the median? Okay, well remember, and this is something everybody seems to forget, is you have to put the numbers in order before you do the median. So let's start with the lowest number. What's the lowest number of all these? It's 75, isn't it? Okay, so we're going to do write 75 first. Then it's 99. Now this is the kind of simple stuff I screw up. What comes next is 107, right? Like, okay, 107. That's actually an O. And then what comes after 107 is 141. And what comes after that is 154. Okay, so remember this is an odd number. See, it's like, I'll use a different color here. So this is position 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So remember n equals 5. So there's an odd number of numbers. So where's our median? Our median is this one right here. So the answer then to number 6 is 107. I just can't write today. Okay, but hopefully you get the picture. Now let's move on. Okay, so you'll see that I skipped ahead and put up questions 7 through 10 here, but I kept the information so we can use it, right? So let's start with question 7. Does this data set have a mode? Now let's remind ourselves, what does mode mean? Mode means when a value of x repeats itself, and it can do, there can be 2 repetitive ones, or there can be 3 or 4, but it has to be at least 2 repeats. But as you can see, we only have 5. Here's where we're looking, is these 5. We're looking for a repeat here. Well, if you only have 5, you're probably not going to have a repeat. So look at these decoy answers, A, B, and C. Yes, the mode is that's just a decoy. There's no repetition, so it just doesn't have a mode. So that's one thing that's different about between mode and median and mean. So mode is a measure of central tendency that sometimes data doesn't have, right? And so you can answer that it doesn't have a mode. But stuff always has a median, right? A continuous variable or a quantitative variable always has a median. It always has a mean. It always has a maximum and minimum. It always has a range. Well, there's maybe a rare case where they're all the same, or something, and then there's an issue. But for the most part, you gotta do that, except for those rare exceptions. But it's really common when stuff doesn't have a mode. Okay, let's move on to question 8, which is, well, here I'll make sure that we have this recorded. What's the maximum and what's the minimum? Well, they kind of give themselves away, but don't hurry through the test. Like, you gotta pay attention here. So we know the minimum is the lowest one, so we'll say that's 75. I'll just write it down here because of all these, that's a little e. And the big E is 154. Don't put 141 by accident by not looking, right? So we'll go, what was this? This is the maximum comes first. Whoops. Wasn't even paying attention. 154 goes up here, and then the minimum is 75. Okay. Now, why do we care? Because we have to do the range. So what is the range? Well, the range is going to be the maximum minus the minimum. So let's put this minus 75, right? And that equals, if you do it out, it equals 79. Now, sometimes people forget to actually do the calculation and get the number, but you don't forget, right? So the answer is going to be here, 79. Okay, we're on the home stretch here. We have questions 11 through 14, and you'll see that I just copied from our earlier calculations this information over here because we need that for these questions. Okay, so let's start with the sample variance. Remember that third column where we made that the squares? Remember the squares? And why did we make the squares? Well, because we had x minus x bar, and then we squared it, and everything was positive, and then it was huge, see 4,000 something. So the reason we did that is that's the top of the variance equation. So just to remind you, the variance equation is x minus x bar squared, so that's the sums of squares, divided by n minus 1. So that's how we're going to get number 11. Well, look at that. We've got the sums of squares here, so that's upstairs, and we got n minus 1 here, that's downstairs. So basically that's just 44116.6 divided by 4, right? And what do you end up with? Well, if you do it right, you get 1 comma 29.2. Okay, so that would go here, 102, gosh, I can't make this right, 9.2. Okay, so let's see here. I got this kind of big here, so we'll go do that. I don't know, you can leave this. We'll leave this variance formula up just in case you forget it. All right, but we don't really need it anymore because the next thing, oh, well, here, I'll reuse it. So how do you make question 12 is the sample standard deviation. If you look in the book, you'll see that that's the same as this formula right here, which is the variance, except, good thing I didn't erase it. That is the square root sign. So you just take the square root. So you can just imagine what we're going to do is we're going to take the square root 1029, well, easy here, 0.2. So what do you think happens when you do that? Well, you get 32.1. 32.1. There's a point in there. Yep. Okay, now we're perfectly happy with that. Next, we're going to talk about Chebyshev. Good old Chebyshev, right? What am I talking about? I'm talking about Chebyshev here. So as if you look in the book, you know, the 75% Chebyshev interval, that would be like your x bar plus or minus 2 times, let's see here, that's like a times the standard deviation, right? So what does that mean in real life? Well, we do have an x bar over here. Look at that. So that we could fill it in 115.2 plus or minus, and then let's do this 2, and we'll make the little star times, and we just did our sample standard deviation, which was 32.1. So theoretically you could work that out, right? Like you take these two, you know, this 2 times 32 plus 0.1, you add it to 1. So if you do 115.2 plus this, then what do you end up with is you end up with 179.4, and that's what goes up here, 179.4. But if you do the minus here, let's see, we'll get rid of this. It's not very clear, but I'll show you here. If we do the minus version, what are we doing? We're doing minus 2 times 32.1. Then you're going to get the lower one, and that's 51. So that would go here. All right. Look at this mess here. Let's get rid of everything. So now you know I got that one. I'll get rid of some of this over here. And finally, we're at the end. We just have to do the coefficient of variation. And so here we have, this is the standard deviation. Whoops, I'm doing this wrong. The standard, this is for standard deviation, so we'll say S. Now I'll do the one for coefficient of variation. Well, what's that? So CV equals S divided by X bar. Here's your star times 100, because it's like a percent, right? So let's fill this in. Can we fill this in? Sure. We did our standard deviation, so that's 32.1, right? And we got an X bar, see? Aren't you glad I got that out for us? So that's 115.2 times 100 equals, well, if you do just the just this part, you get 0.28. So of course, if you times it by 100, you get 28%. And 28% is then the answer. All right. So let's look at this a little clearer. Okay, so before we depart each other's company, I just wanted to show you what it looks like if you don't write really horrifically like I do and you actually have things clear. So here are the answers, and now that you're all prepped up for chapter 3.1 and 3.2, I hope you do well on the quiz.